Well, hopes for a smooth handover from a mining boom to a building boom are gathering a bit of momentum, but the pace of change is still too slow. But some who say that the transition is set to be a real nail-biter. That's all according to the latest report on building in Australia from BIS Shrapnel. And for more on the findings of this research, we're joined by Dr. Kim Hawtrey, the head of building at BIS Shrapnel, now here in the studio. Great to see you. Give us an overall picture then of what you've found and how big a part the building sector is going to play, you think, in coming years in filling the gap left by the mining investment boom.
Well, as you know, the Australian economy has had a mining investment boom, which everybody now recognises is peaking or has peaked, and it's about to cool down. And the big question is what can step in and take its place over the next year or two or three. And as we were preparing our Building in Australia forecast this year, we were especially mindful of that. And we feel that the recovery in building and construction, while it's going to build up momentum over the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be uncomfortably slow, and not all states will benefit from that.
A real nail-biter, as you put it.
A real nail-biter. The next 12 months will be a real test of the construction industry and whether it can take on more of the heavy lifting as mining cools.
Let's focus in on residential there and what your forecasts are for that. What's the outlook over this financial year and coming years?
We have a flat outlook for this current financial year because basically you've got a very mixed picture across the states. The southeastern states, Victoria in particular, have been having a bit of a boom, and that's unsustainable, and they're due for a downward correction. At the same time, you've got New South Wales, Western Australia and Queensland, which we think have what it takes to drive a recovery in building, especially Sydney. Population growth is very strong, affordability is the best that it's been for a long time, and we feel that the conditions are right for confidence to recover.
What's been holding back home construction?
It has been a question of confidence. Affordability is always an issue, especially for first home buyers, but confidence is really the key in the property sector, and since the GFC, people have had concerns about the global economy, they've been worried about high levels of household debt, and as time goes on and the Australian economy's recovery becomes more broad beyond the resources sector, we think that we'll see the New South Wales economy in particular taking the lead.
And with rates so low, I mean, does that surprise you, or are there other issues out there as well holding back home?
That's a little bit of a puzzle. We've got record low interest rates, the lowest in 50 years, and by now you would have expected that to have really seen a clear recovery in the mortgage sector and the housing sector. And so far it's been a kind of a step forward and a step back. The signals are still very mixed. Part of the issue is demographic. We've got the baby boom generation, which once drove building activity, now is in some sense holding it back because the baby boomers are retiring. And young people, for their part, are concerned about affordability issues and changes to first home buyer grants, which have come in over the last year or so.
So, I mean, is that sort of playing out then in what you're seeing in terms of detached house building as opposed to multi-dwelling apartment blocks?
Yes, we're seeing a real swing over the next year or two away from multi-dwellings towards detached houses, especially in Victoria. They've had a high-rise apartment boom in Victoria. Victoria's been outbuilding New South Wales by a phenomenal rate despite having a smaller population, and it's really unsustainable for Melbourne to keep doing that. Meanwhile, we're seeing recovery in detached houses in New South Wales. We'll also see some high-rise apartment building in New South Wales, in Sydney especially. So it will be a conventional, broad-based recovery that will build momentum in New South Wales and Western Australia and Queensland over the next 2 to 3 years.
In terms then of the non-residential side of the market, what are your expectations for this financial year and what will drive that?
We see in this financial year non-residential building rising by about 7% in terms of commencements, and if you look at the trend in approvals over the past year, approvals I think have been rising for about 7 months in a row now of non-residential. The private sector will be driving the recovery in non-residential building from here on. The public sector, as we know, is cutting back, and some of those big hospital projects which have held the figures up in the last couple of years, they'll be dropping out of the figures. It'll very much be a commercial-led recovery now. Offices, retail, hotels, and very much a private sector show.
But as you said, within that private sector building, though, there will be some parts that are doing well and seeing growth, but others holding back, though, in coming years?
Growth areas such as aged care, there's undersupply of hotels in key areas.
Okay.
The falling Australian dollar will help to stimulate tourism again, and it will help to stimulate business travel. We will also see some new developments in retail as they try to compete with the online competition, and we'll also expect to see growth in office accommodation as the economy strengthens in the eastern states.
Okay. What about access to funding? What's that been like, and how do you expect that to change then over coming years?
Access to funding is still an issue, and that's certainly been one of the factors holding back commercial building. But with a low interest rate environment, as we have right now, and we're seeing the trend in approvals coming through, we do expect to see some underlying strength in non-residential building. So the low interest rates will help that.
And when you're looking at the non-residential and the residential side of things, which is of greater importance then, do you think, to getting the economy going and perhaps filling that gap from the mining investment boom?
Definitely the housing sector is the one that has the most broad-based multiplier effect, because when you build a house you need concreters, you need tradesmen, plumbers. People then go to the hardware store and they go to the homeware store. So it really has a ripple effect throughout the economy, which is unrivaled almost by any other sector. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking for that housing recovery. The non-residential then tends to follow as the housing develops.
Will it be enough that the growth that you're going to see, that you're predicting to see in New South Wales, Queensland and WA, will that be enough to perhaps offset the weakness you're predicting in Victoria?
Not in the next 12 months. And that's our forecast, that essentially the overall national outlook for residential building, for all building in the next year, is pretty much flat, because Victoria will be unfortunately offsetting the gains made in New South Wales. But once we get more than a year out into 2014-15, then we expect to see that the momentum in New South Wales will really start showing through and Victoria will stabilise.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking us through that report, Dr. Kim Hawtrey.
Pleasure.
From BAS Shrapnel there. Coming up on First Business.